As a capstone to my 3D pen experience, I made a giant robot. As always, I like to start with a sketch. My first strategy was to make a hollow robot, of making the skin and then adding embellishments. But I quickly decided that I didn't want some superficial, skin-deep robot. If this robot even wants to have a chance at gaining sentience, it will need a heart with which it can feel. So I restarted the project with a skeleton and built the robot in the same way I'd approach the task of actually building one of these, from the inside out. If you gave me $1 billion to start this project in real life, which, Elon, if you're listening, you should totally do, then I'd start with a skeleton and I'd hang all of the important hydraulics and electrical bits off of that skeleton. Really, technical stuff. When you're laying the groundwork for a giant robot, you can really go one of two ways. Either you can make your robot a force for good in the world, or you can make an evil robot. We, of course, are going to be making a good robot. Don't mind the sword. We'll talk about that later. For you, the 3D pen user, the most important thing to do right now is to spend the time to get the skeleton right. We want to make sure this thing is as good as we can get it. Any errors in this stage will just be compounded. I'm trying to make sure that the general size and pose of the robot is correct. I'd like the robot to be facing down, like it saw some small, insignificant human to gently step over without causing any harm. As I'm looking at this, it feels a little bit short, so I'm going to make my robot a little bit taller by adding a touch more backbone. Now would be a good time to say that this will be the last 3D pen video that I'll be posting for a bit. I'm going to go on to learning something new. I enjoyed my time with the 3D pen, but it can be tedious sometimes. This looks okay. Unfortunately for our robot, the next step is to remove its leg. So let's just go ahead and extract that. We of course aren't monsters, and we will provide a temporary prosthesis for our robot. It's not the most stable, but it should provide some dignity while it's being fabricated. We wouldn't want our robot wobbling around. Good as new. When building a humanoid robot, you have to decide how human you want it to appear. We're trying to build a friendly robot, not some blank, unfeeling, faceless killer. So, I want to give this robot a little bit of curve. The 3D pen filament I was using is coiled, so it has some natural tension. I've snipped a little bit of that filament off, and I'm fitting it into the leg to mimic calf muscles. The reason I took the leg off the robot is simply because my human fingers and hands lack the precision to get into all the nooks and crannies. I own a 3D printer, but I like to think of the 3D pen process a little like sketching versus photography. You can pull out your phone and get a pretty good representation of a scene. The 3D pen is like a sketch. It's not as precise, but it typically conveys a touch more emotion than a photograph. The general strategy here is to have the red skeleton underneath, and then a silver substructure, kind of resembling a truss or a lattice. Then on top of that, have this red armor plating. I really want this robot to read like it has some texture. By adding these different layers, it gives it some depth, it makes it more interesting. If we were just to shrink wrap this, just to cover a cylinder and put little doodads on it, I don't think it would feel as real. I tried to align the grain of the armor plates to appear more like muscle fibers. That way, the armor would feel a little more organic. As promised, we're going to return the robot's leg so it can stand once more, and then promptly remove the other leg. We're going to detail out the other leg similar to the first. However, we're not going to make it symmetric. The main reason is that it's way easier to just make a new design than it is to try to make a perfectly mirrored copy of the other leg. Now I'm going to do something that at least to me is slightly uncomfortable to watch. You might find it uncomfortable too. Snip and snip. That looks uncomfortable. Why do I mildly empathize with a half-finished chunk of melted plastic getting its arms chopped off? Probably because I'm human, and because the robot is human-shaped, it gets some empathy. Hopefully we can always remember to extend empathy to all the actual humans in our lives. On a less serious note, once the robots turn evil and decide they want to rid the world of us, their creators, they'll probably be smart enough to design themselves not to look like what we think of as killer robots. They'll probably design themselves to look like puppies. We'll be too busy trying to feed them kibble to see the knife coming. Now we're just gonna put a few last touches on the rib cage. There we go. Before we give the robot back its arms, we'll need to dress them up a bit, using the same techniques we used on the legs. We're also going to think through the sword. I know I mentioned that this would be a peaceful robot, but we would hate for our robot to get bullied, so we'll give him this ceremonial sword. It will mostly be used for knighting other robots, photo opportunities, or intimidating a conquered city into submission. I mean, perhaps it will just hang above the robot's fireplace, and all of the robot's friends will ask if it's real. The other arm is going to have this kind of armadillo effect forearm shield thing. I'm using the wood burning tool to smooth out the edges. While we're working on these armored plate things, we'll also make sure to give our robot some abs. These aren't strictly necessary, but when the robot wants to take some shirtless selfies, he'll appreciate the attention to detail. With the sword and the arms worked through, we're going to start putting it all together. I wasn't sure exactly how the arm was going to hold the sword, but putting his hand on went surprisingly smoothly. Now that I'm looking at it all, however, it looks like the left arm is just a little too long, so I'm going to snip it right off with a pair of scissors and shorten the arm. The material melts easily, and the design of the robot is so loose that it can handle some imperfections. I don't know why it takes so long to become a surgeon. This is pretty easy stuff. While we're reattaching the arm and placing the shield thing, we should probably discuss the power source of the robot. If you've ever seen Pacific Rim, you know that robots could run on either diesel power or nuclear power. This robot actually runs on a third type of power. It's inexhaustible, the hubris of humanity. With the power source defined, the next major subsystem will be the robot's brain. So to detail that out, we'll have to remove the head. Admittedly, a human surgeon couldn't do this in a surgery, so maybe I should cut them some slack. Right now, of course, the robot will be controlled by two... Oh, come on. You're dropping your sword already? How is this robot ever going to defend itself if it can't even hold on to its own sword? Well, we're going to fix that up, and it's actually a pretty easy fix. The funding committee of the robot ran some consumer focus groups to decide on the faceplate color, and eventually decided on black. This was the one part of the model that I wanted to look nice and glossy and smooth, so I used a piece of glass. The smooth surface finish of the glass was transferred to the faceplate of the robot. After this, I added some antenna capabilities to the head, mostly because the pilots were complaining about the slow internet speeds. After this upgrade, and a few last armor strips, the robot was ready for its first photo shoot. I particularly like how the glossy faceplate contrasted with the messy, textured surfaces. Once we get to the top of this frame, you can see that we're missing something very important, a stand. I was originally going to create some buildings for scale, but decided that was a little too on the nose. So instead, I made this little stand for the robot. I could see a bad science fiction movie where the robot sits unused for a few decades as a statue, until a teenager figures out that it used to be a robot and gets it running again. What am I going to do with the blowtorch? Glad you asked. There's all these little strings of plastic here, and so I'm just going to burn them off real quick. You definitely don't want to let this linger. It will melt your robot. There's something really satisfying about doing this. If you've made it this far into the build, I should let you know how I currently anticipate running the channel. I think I'll focus mostly on learning new skills, and if in the process of learning a new skill, I think a project merits its own video, then I'll make one of these detailed videos. If that sounds interesting to you, you may consider subscribing to this channel. If you just want more 3D pen videos, you should check out the Koreans. Seriously, they're a lot better at this than I am. In the end, I think the robot captured the emotion of the sketch and served its function as a kind of capstone project. I was pleased with how this definitely not evil robot turned out, and hope that when it conquers humanity, it will at least keep me around due to a sense of robotic nostalgia. Thank you.